Sealed court documents, a judge's ruling, and somebody on the inside just cracked the vault wide open. Listen, I genuinely was not planning to revisit this entire situation. Truly, I had made peace with letting the lawyers handle this catastrophe in private. But the universe had different plans because what just surfaced from that courtroom is so unhinged, so deliberately cruel, so calculated in its intent to wound, that sitting this one out would be malpractice. And I use that time loosely because what we are about to dissect goes way beyond celebrity drama. This is a full-blown psychological warfare campaign being waged through the American legal system, and the collateral damage is going to be measured in children who will one day Google their own names and find wreckage they never created. So here is what happened. Somebody, and we are going to talk about WHO in a minute because that detail alone will spike your blood pressure, leaked sealed divorce filings from the ongoing dissolution of Cardi B and Offset's marriage. TMZ confirmed they obtained an official court order dated February 25, 2026, and buried in that paperwork was a request that should make your stomach turn. Offset, the same man who spent years dragging this woman through every conceivable form of public humiliation, formally petitioned the court to order DNA paternity testing on not one but TWO of Cardi's youngest children. Let that marinate for a second. He went through attorneys, filed motions, sat in front of a judge, and said with a straight face that he wanted genetic proof regarding his own kids and the child Cardi had with someone else. But do not react yet, because the court's response is where the real story detonates. See, the judge looked at both requests and made a split decision that tells you absolutely everything you need to know about what is actually happening here. On one hand, the paternity test for the newborn, the baby boy Cardi welcomed in November 2025 with NFL star Stefon Diggs, was flat out denied, rejected. The judge essentially said no. You do not get to demand genetic testing on a child that is clearly not part of your marital equation. The separation was documented. The relationship was public. Denied. But on the other hand, and this is the part that has the entire internet losing its collective mind right now, the judge granted the paternity request for a second child. The birth dates in the filing are redacted, which is standard in family court proceedings involving minors. But one of the children is specifically described as a newborn. The other, based on timeline and basic deduction, appears to be Blossom. Born September 2024. 1 year old. Cardi and Offset's youngest daughter together. And right there, in that one judicial decision, this entire thing shifts from messy divorce drama to something significantly darker and more personal. Because think about what that means. Really sit with it. He is standing in a courtroom, under oath, in front of a judge, raising his hand and formally declaring that he has doubts about whether his own baby daughter belongs to him. Blossom, a child who was born while their marriage was still technically intact. He wants a test. He wants to plant that seed of doubt into the permanent legal record where it will live forever, searchable, citable, and impossible to erase. And before we go any further, I need you to understand something critical about why the judge denied the test for one child but approved it for the other, because this legal distinction is the key that unlocks the entire strategy. And trust me, it is a strategy. This is chess. Ugly, vindictive, child-involving chess. Under Georgia law, there is a presumption of legitimacy. Any child born during a marriage is legally presumed to be the husband's child. That presumption can only be overturned through formal paternity proceedings initiated by one of the parties. Now, the baby with Stefon Diggs was born in November 2025, well over a year after Cardi filed for divorce in July 2024. The separation was public, documented, and undeniable. Stefon and Cardi had been officially together since at least May 2025 when they went Instagram official at that Knicks playoff game, courtside, holding hands, the whole thing. By the time the baby arrived, there was absolutely no legal or logical basis for Offset to claim any connection to that child. So the judge looked at his request and said, respectfully, this has nothing to do with you. Sit down. But Blossom? Blossom sits right in that dangerous overlap zone. And that is exactly where Offset's legal team wanted to plant their flag. Let me reconstruct this timeline because this is where it gets surgically precise and deeply unsettling. Pull up a calendar in your mind. Cardi filed for divorce on July 31st, 2024. She announced her pregnancy with Blossom literally the very next day. August 1st, Blossom was born in September 2024. Now, depending on when conception occurred, and we are talking basic gestational math here, there is a window, however narrow, however circumstantial, where Offset's legal team could theoretically argue that paternity needs formal confirmation. Especially if, and this is the part that Offset has been hinting at on social media for months without saying it outright, he believes there was overlap in Cardi's romantic timeline, that she was already involved with someone else while they were still technically married. Now, here's the angle that absolutely nobody is exploring, and honestly, this is what keeps me up at night about this whole thing. I do not believe for a single second that Offset genuinely questions whether Blossom is his daughter. Not for 1 second. Not for half a second. And here is why my conviction is rock solid on this. This man had physical custody of Blossom during visitation periods. His mother had that baby in her home. His sister, who reportedly cannot stand Cardi according to Cardi's own public statements, had access to that child. You are telling me that in all that time, with all the animosity burning between these families, with all the suspicion he clearly harbors, nobody in that household quietly grabbed an at-home DNA kit from the nearest pharmacy? Those tests cost $30. You swab the inside of a cheek. You put it in a prepaid envelope. Results arrive in 5 to 7 business days. Are we really supposed to believe that a man this paranoid, this vengeful, this obsessed with maintaining control over his narrative, never once took that step on his own time? Because I am telling you right now, I would bet my entire reputation that he already knows. He has his answer. He has probably had it for months. And this court filing was never, ever about discovering biological truth. It was about creating an official, court-stamped, legally documented public record that questions Cardi's faithfulness during their marriage. It was about manufacturing a paper trail of doubt designed to humiliate her, destabilize her new relationship, and tattoo a question mark onto those children's identities for the rest of their searchable, indexable digital lives. This is not a paternity dispute. Let me be crystal clear about that. This is emotional terrorism wearing a suit and tie, sitting in a courtroom, and carrying a briefcase full of legal filings. And that brings us to the leak itself. Because hold on, we need to talk about this part, because it might be the most outrageous element of the entire saga. These documents were sealed by the court. Let me repeat that with the emphasis it deserves. Sealed. That means a judge specifically determined that the contents of these filings were sensitive enough, particularly because minor children were involved, that they needed protection from public disclosure. Someone with authorized access, someone inside the legal process, deliberately extracted those protected documents and funneled them to TMZ. So let us engage in a brief exercise of critical thinking, shall we? Who benefits from these particular documents going public? Who gained strategic advantage from the world knowing that paternity was questioned? Cardi B? Absolutely not. In what universe would a mother volunteer for the entire internet to speculate about her children's biological parentage? What possible benefit could she derive from that? That makes less than 0 sense. That leaves one glaringly obvious suspect. And I am not going to sit here and name names because the gag order technically exists, but I will say this. The person who benefits from this leak has a well-documented, repeatedly demonstrated, extensively archived history of leaking information, posting subliminal messages on Instagram, and manufacturing public spectacles designed to control narratives. I will let you connect those dots yourself because they practically draw a straight line. But wait, because there is something even more disturbing buried underneath all of this that most people are skipping over entirely, and it changes the whole complexion of the story. The court order issued on February 25th contained more than just the DNA request ruling. It also included a mutual restraining provision, a gag order, essentially prohibiting both Offset and Cardi from making disparaging or defamatory remarks about each other on social media or in interviews. Both of them, equal application. Now, what did Offset do almost immediately after this order landed? He posted a photograph of a demolished vehicle on his Instagram. No caption, no explanation, no hashtags, just twisted metal and shattered glass. The imagery of destruction dropped into the feed without context at the precise moment he was legally forbidden from speaking. Now, I am not a cryptographer, and I certainly cannot read minds. But when a man is legally prohibited from talking, and his immediate response is to post an image of catastrophic wreckage, the message is not exactly subtle, is it? That is plausible deniability, gift-wrapped in passive aggression, served on a plate of barely concealed contempt. A judge told him to keep quiet, and his response was to scream in symbols. Now, let us rewind even further, because the DNA stunt did not materialize out of thin air. This is merely the latest escalation in a pattern of behavior that stretches back years, and every single chapter points in one unmistakable direction. Remember the Georgia house situation? Because this context is critical to understanding the mentality we're dealing with. Cardi was reportedly financing that property. The mortgage, the utilities, the maintenance, everything flowing from her accounts. And why was she the one funding it? Well, multiple sources including allegations from Selena Powell suggest that Offset is carrying significant financial burdens, reportedly including approximately $2 million owed to the IRS and outstanding gambling debts across multiple casinos. So picture the scene. Cardi is writing checks for a home she cannot even peacefully occupy, And inside that very house, Offset's new romantic interest is filming TikTok content, dancing, lip-syncing, making herself visibly, publicly, provocatively comfortable in a home subsidized by the woman her partner was still legally married to. And Cardi was screaming, publicly, desperately, she was begging for boundaries. I do not want anyone else in my house. That is my home. Keep her out of my space. And her pleas hit a wall of absolute indifference. Nobody cared. Nobody listened. The TikToks kept posting. Then came the escalation that crossed every remaining line. The harassment intensified. Unannounced appearances. Monitoring of her movements. Communications so threatening in nature that Cardi formally reported feeling afraid for her physical safety. And a court agreed with her assessment seriously enough to issue a restraining order. Let that sink in. A judge reviewed the evidence of his behavior and concluded that legal protection was necessary to keep her safe. This is not a man navigating a painful breakup. This is a textbook pattern of coercive control that would activate alarm bells in any domestic violence prevention center in America. And when you hold that entire behavioral history in your mind, the DNA paternity request does not seem confusing at all. It clicks into place with sickening precision. This is a man who lost dominion over someone he considered his. And he is pulling every single lever, legal, social, emotional, financial, to reassert control from a distance. But believe it or not, we are still not done. Because there is an entire dimension to this story that makes Offset's chess move look even more calculated and, honestly, laughably hypocritical. Let us talk about Stefon Diggs, because the irony embedded in this situation is so dense it could collapse into a black hole. Offset is out here demanding paternity tests, right? Formally questioning whether children are biologically his, positioning himself as the wrong party in a narrative of potential infidelity. Meanwhile, Stefon Diggs, the man Cardi moved on with, the man she fell in love with after extracting herself from Offset's chaos, has his own incredibly public, extensively documented paternity timeline that makes this entire circus look like a sideshow at a county fair. Stefon Diggs fathered children with 4 different women in 2025 alone. Read that again. For women, 1 calendar year. His daughter Nova was born back in 2016 with Tyler Marie. Then, 2025 became a whole production. Charlie Harper arrived in April with Aileen Lopra. A son with Kiana Barber followed sometime that same year. A daughter with Kay Benji, also 2025. And then the baby boy with Cardi in November, making it 4 new children in 12 months. Lopra actually filed a paternity and child support lawsuit against Diggs, which was eventually dropped after a DNA test, a real one, the kind pursued in good faith, confirmed that Diggs was the father. Her attorney publicly stated that paternity had been confirmed and that Diggs acknowledged his daughter. And then there is the unverified but widely circulated claim from YouTube personality Storm Monroe, who alleged that Diggs has 3 additional children expected in 2026. 3 more. If true, that would bring his total to a number that defies easy counting. Now, this claim is unverified and neither Diggs nor Cardi has addressed it. But it is circulating. It is in the atmosphere. And it adds yet another layer to the cosmic irony of Offset demanding DNA tests from a woman who left him for a man whose own paternity situation makes a genealogy database look understaffed. But here is where I need to separate the messy from the malicious, because those are fundamentally different things, and this distinction matters enormously. Diggs is dealing with the consequences of his own romantic choices. That is messy. That is complicated. That involves multiple families and co-parenting arrangements and legal obligations. But it is forward-facing. He is acknowledging his children. He is taking DNA tests when asked. He is not hiding from it. Offset is weaponizing sealed court documents to retroactively question children who already exist in order to inflict maximum psychological damage on their mother. That is not messy. That is malicious. Those 2 things live on different moral planets, and I refuse to let anyone conflate them. And speaking of moving forward, the timing of this leak reveals something that I think is the most damning piece of the entire puzzle. These documents were filed in February 2026. They leaked in April 2026. What was happening in Cardi's world in April? She was in the middle of her Little Miss drama tour, selling out arenas across the country, riding a professional high. She had publicly stated that she felt reborn after the divorce, like a completely new person emerging from the wreckage of a toxic marriage. And just days before these documents hit the press, Stefon Diggs was spotted at her Washington, D.C. tour stop, sparking reconciliation rumors after they had reportedly split following the Super Bowl. Think about that convergence. Cardi is thriving professionally. She is potentially reuniting with the man she moved on with. She is publicly declaring her own resurrection. And at that exact apex of happiness and momentum, sealed court documents questioning her children's DNA mysteriously materialize in the press. If you believe that is coincidence, I have a bridge connecting two fictional islands I would love to sell you. This has every hallmark of a calculated disruption campaign. You observe, you wait, you identify the moment of maximum vulnerability disguised as maximum strength, and then you deploy the weapon you have been holding in reserve. It is a playbook as old as revenge itself, and the execution here is textbook. Now, here's the part of this whole situation that genuinely breaks something inside me when I sit with it for too long. Blossom is 1 year old. Culture is 7. Wave is 4. These are real children with real futures and real feelings that are developing more rapidly than any of the adults in this situation seem to appreciate. Blossom is going to grow up. She is going to be 10, 15, 20 years old. She is going to have full unrestricted access to the internet. And she is going to find every single piece of this. Every headline, every court filing summary, every blog post and YouTube commentary and Reddit thread dissecting whether her own father believed she was really his. That is not hypothetical. That is an inevitability. And the emotional weight of discovering that your father formally, legally questioned your parentage during the wife's period of his life is something no child should have to carry. The same applies to the baby boy born in November. Even though the judge denied the paternity test for him, the request itself is now permanently embedded in public record. Both of these children will someday encounter information that was supposed to be sealed for their protection, information that someone decided to sacrifice on the altar of petty revenge. And listen, I know there are people in the comments right now preparing to type something along the lines of, well, he has every right to ask for a paternity test. And technically, legally, yes, the legal system permits these filings. You have the procedural right to question paternity under certain circumstances, and a judge will evaluate the merit of your request. Nobody is disputing the legal mechanism, but there is a Grand Canyon-sized gap between what you are legally permitted to do and what you morally should do. And the motivation behind the action is what separates legitimate inquiry from targeted cruelty. If Offset had genuine, good faith concerns about Blossom's parentage, there were a dozen quiet, dignified, private avenues available to him. Attorney-to-attorney negotiation, a private agreement for confidential testing, even a direct conversation. Instead, he chose the single most public, most inflammable, most permanently damaging path available to him. And then, if the pattern holds, someone on his side ensured the whole world found out. That is not a father seeking truth. That is an ex-husband stockpiling ammunition. So where does all of this leave us? Let me map it out because this story has more active threads than a surveillance operation. Legally, the divorce is still active. Still, nearly 2 years after Cardi filed in July 2024, they remain technically married and entangled in proceedings. Reports suggest Offset has been deliberately stalling, allegedly demanding properties and drawing the process out as long as humanly possible. The paternity test for Blossom, which the judge approved, will presumably proceed unless appealed. If the results confirm what I believe they will confirm, that Offset is indeed Blossom's biological father, then this entire legal exercise will have been nothing more than a publicly funded humiliation campaign that achieved nothing except generating headlines and inflicting emotional damage. The gag order remains in effect, though apparently it applies with varying degrees of seriousness depending on who you ask and what kind of car crash photos qualify as protected speech. And Cardi keeps building. Tour dates keep selling. Music keeps dropping. She told interviewers she was reborn, and frankly, watching someone survive this level of prolonged, calculated, multi-front assault and still show up every night on stage, raising 4 children, running a business empire, and maintaining enough composure to not violate a gag order herself, that deserves its own documentary. But I want to leave you with the thought that has been haunting me since I started researching this piece, because it extends far beyond who is dating who and whose DNA belongs to whom. What we are watching unfold in real time is a case study in how legal systems designed to protect families can be reverse-engineered into instruments of abuse. Restraining orders, sealed filings, custody motions, paternity challenges, Every single one of these mechanisms exists for legitimate, protective purposes, but when they are wielded by someone whose primary motivation is punishment rather than truth, they become weapons that the system itself struggles to defend against. And the casualties are always the same. The smallest people in the room. The ones whose names get redacted in court documents but whose lives, hearts, and futures remain fully exposed to the fallout. The children did not file for divorce. The children did not cheat. The children did not gamble away money at casinos or make threats or post car crash photos on Instagram. But they are the ones who will carry the permanent, irrevocable weight of every decision the adults made during the worst version of themselves. Offset had choices. He could have been a co-parent. He could have focused his energy on building a meaningful relationship with Culture, Wave, and Blossom that existed independently from his unresolved feelings toward their mother. He could have let the divorce finalize, addressed his debts, put in the work, and moved forward with whatever dignity remained available to him. Instead, he chose scorched earth. And scorched earth has never, in the entire history of human conflict, produced anything except ash and regret. Something tells me this is just the intermission, though. The divorce is unresolved. The paternity test is pending. The gag order is being tested in real time. And sealed documents are apparently being distributed like promotional flyers by whoever decided the court's sealing order was more of a suggestion than a mandate. The next chapter of this story, it might make everything we just discussed look like the warm-up act. Drop your thoughts below, because this situation has more layers than anyone initially realized, and I have a feeling the receipts are just getting started.